Opening day at Santa Anita Park is Sunday, December 26th, Boxing Day, and they're kicking off with a huge day. 6 graded stakes, including the Run Happy Malibu and the Mathis Brothers Mile. All fans in attendance get the wall calendar, always a wildly popular option. Decades of photos from the great race place. If you want to go to opening day, choose your experience. SantaAnita.com/events. Santa's also partnering with Mathis Brothers Furniture to raise money for horse aftercare. Donate $20 and you can choose your Mathis Brothers gift, a plush horse, a water bottle, or a Mathis Mile hat. And then the racing season is going to continue with holiday racing on Monday, December 27th. Great concession deals, beers and sodas for $1, hot dogs for $2, making me tempted to fly to California. Opening week features racing on Thursday, January 30th through Sunday, January 2nd. We're going to have plenty of extra coverage of that opening weekend in particular over at InTheMoneyPodcast.com. And we hope to see you at the races opening week at Santa Anita. Once again, SantaAnita.com/events to explore your experience at Santa Anita. Hello and welcome to the In the Money Players podcast. Peter Thomas Fornatel, so happy to be back with you from the Brooklyn Bunker, Friday, December 17th for this edition of the Players Podcast. A few notes. First of all, got to thank everybody out there who voted for us for the America's Best Racing Fans Choice Award for Best Podcast. You can see last year's statue up there behind me. He is going to have a friend. Thank you so much. What an honor it is to be voted by you, the fans. And of course, we see it as not just this show thing, but the whole network. And we want to thank everybody out there, all of our contributors, obviously all the other podcast hosts, but people who contribute to the website as well, just who've made, In the Money into a thing. I've been looking at our numbers over the last few months or so. We continue to build momentum. It's all because of you, the viewers, the listeners. If you have feedback, hit us up. I'm at Looms Boldly on Twitter. InTheMoneyPodcast.com through the contact page. That goes right to my email. Let us know what else you want to hear. If you have any questions too, we'll be doing a listener appreciation show, hopefully, between now and the end of the year. But before that, we've got a great show for you today. A little bit leaner and meaner than a lot of our late week shows. Going to be putting a real focus on Aqueduct, their pick 6 for Saturday. Going to have Matt Vagvolgyi here to talk about that. And while we have Matt, who's such a master when it comes to all things statistical, power user of Stats Race Lens, we're going to do a little bit of a preview of the Santa Anita meet. Going to be hearing a lot more about Santa Anita. Going to be doing handicapping on the show next week for opening day and also their second day of racing as well. Last but not least, we're going to have Klaus Ebner here today from Woodbine. He's going to be talking about what some of the things he learned at the Tucson conference last week where I was, and also looking ahead to the JRA Races Saturday night, and also a little bit of a sneak early preview at what's going on next week. As far as I know, the only pari-mutuel racing we're going to have in the world and to bet on in North America is going to be that JRA stuff on Christmas for Christmas Day, for those of you who can't get enough horse racing action. But that's the plan, and we'll all kick it off right after this. Imagine an app that brings your sports betting group chat to life, an app that can link to your sports book so you can easily share your bets with a simple click while following the game through a live in-chat score banner that makes it feel like you're in the stadium. Sound too good to be true? Well, not anymore. Chalkboard has turned sports betting into a complete group experience. Compete against your friends for the top spot on the leaderboard and share your winning bets in the message board. Be the expert with Chalkboard. Download the app today through the App Store and be sure to join the Odds Honest Truth Board to get free money each and every week. The team has been crushing it on there, including a perfect 7 for 7 last week. Folks, don't miss this opportunity to be handed free money. Sign up for Chalkboard and join the Odds Honest Truth Board on there today. Next up on the show, very happy to be joined for the penultimate time for the season as we're getting to the end of our existing partnership with the JRA. Hopefully we'll be coming back and doing even more stuff come 2022. But let's talk about what's happening Saturday night into Sunday morning. Klaus Ebner from Woodbine is back with us. Klaus, how are things?
Good, Pete. How you doing?
Things are good. Very happy to be back after all the travel, all those industry conferences and things. Maybe we'll start there, actually. Just curious if you had any overarching takeaway from the Tucson conference where we got to spend some time last week?
Yeah, so for me, it was really just a bit of a mixed bag. Usually, I get to attend a lot more of the sessions and seminars, but with it being on hiatus for 1 year, it was kind of like, hey, I need to meet with you. And that's kind of how things happen there in Tucson, especially for both of us, which is kind of like, hey, you got 5 minutes, and that 5 minutes turns into 20 minutes, and that 20 minutes turns into an hour, and you kind of you're going from meeting to meeting, lunch to lunch, and it's just your head's spinning after a while. But in terms of the seminars, I know that the on the Monday they had the racing commissioners seminar, which is really good in terms of speaking to our racing guys. So, and that's what we're really needing in this industry, right? It's just tracks talking to one another, kind of saying, hey, what are you guys doing? What are we doing? How do we get more horses, field sizes, initiatives that work, initiatives that don't work? And again, it's just people talking. And these conferences are good for that, where, industry leaders and executives are kind of sitting down together and saying, okay, what works for you? What doesn't work for you? And again, the whole meeting with partners and ideas and brainstorming. Again, these are all great things for the industry. And I know that you and I spoke a little bit, and they were a little bit light in terms of the horse player side. And I agree that, that wasn't as much of a focus this year. But, again, I think we're kind of coming out of the, well, who knows if we're coming out of it, but, in the middle of the pandemic, coming out of the pandemic, however you want to see it. But anyways, there was a big focus on that in terms of, next steps and how to move forward. And for me, the looming, cloud over all of us is the whole fixed odds wagering, sports wagering, and how does that sort of impact all of us? And again, there were some good conversations to be had there, especially on the lines of fixed odds. As a person who wagers into pari-mutuel pools, I think a lot of us want to arbitrage our bets sometimes and have that fixed odds option to us, but as a person that works for a racetrack, there's also a lot of concern in terms of what happens to our pari-mutuel pool. So does that cannibalize our win pools, and how does it all work? So again, I don't think there's a magic bullet to anything, but I think the main thing is there's a discussion to be had, and all of us as an industry kind of come together and discuss, what's good and bad about these things.
As a horse player who's wishing to be a fly on the wall, a fly with a voice on the wall at some of those meetings, especially you mentioned the racing secretaries one, like, okay, now that you're all in the same room, can we talk about post times and having races maybe staggered a little bit more? There were a few other instances like that where just as a horse player was hoping we could have more of a voice, and maybe we can in the future. They seem very much open to the idea of creative input. I'd love to see In the Money get more involved next year and be providing people to attend a panel. And I mean, I get it, like for people in the industry, this is their chance to talk to each other, but hey, why not also make it a chance to talk to your customers? And that's something that I think our company in particular can provide. Do you think they'd be open to something like that? I get the sense that they would be.
Yeah, possibly, Peter. I don't say why not. And I'm not trying to toot our own horn or Woodbine, but to your point about post-time management, that's a huge thing, right? In terms of races clashing on one another, in terms of going off at the same time. And I know we see it on Twitter every single weekend where it's just like, hey, we have there's only 3 races in North America, and all 3 of them are going off at the same time right now. So, and again, just we as racetracks need to do better. You need to have people working in your departments, whether it be wagering, racing, etc., to have this front of mind. And not to get my soapbox here, Pete, but at the end of the day, you don't want to be a racetrack that's making your customers choose between your own content and other content in the market at the same time, right? So you want to give your customer an option of playing you as opposed to playing another track. So if we as Woodbine are going off, well, we know we're going to stay away from Niagara, we're going to stay away from California. And, you can't stay away from everyone. But there are sweet spots I know our team works on in terms of trying to find, areas where we sort of have our own timing. But again, to your point, yeah, there's sometimes certain tracks you're kind of just like, are you guys watching what's going on? Or are you just setting post times and rolling the dice, right? And that's what it seems like sometimes for certain tracks. And again, I'm not going to point out any tracks at all, but you know what I mean? Just you can kind of see it saying, hey, have you guys looked at this at all in terms of what you're doing and making your customers choose? And you don't want to make customers choose at the end of the day.
Well, one of the many areas in the game that can use improvement. Maybe that's one that's more low hanging fruit and realistic to be able to at least get some key players chatting about and hopefully continued communication at places like the Tucson conference, the RTIP conference is the one that we're talking about, can help create environment that's a little bit more player friendly, at least in these areas where it should be easy. I know there's others where it's a lot harder, but when it comes to this stuff, it feels like it shouldn't have to be this hard. Let's talk about this weekend's JRA races, Klaus. We're getting to the end of what's been an incredibly memorable season. I think you could argue on the world stage, maybe the most memorable season for the JRA. What do we have to look forward to on Saturday night?
So this weekend is all about the upcoming horses, if you will. So 2-year-olds on display going a mile in the Acai Futurity Stakes. So as the title suggests, again, this is the 2-year-old colts in here. And really, for me, kind of it's funny how you speak about, the JRA and their mark on the world this year. But this race is kind of ironically all about the North American angle for me. So it's all about, horses, especially on the bloodlines that have, shipped into Japan. So for instance, you have a horse in the form of Danon Scorpion. Well, guess, his mom is Lexi Liu. Lexi Liu was the winner of the Queen's Plate. So somewhat dear to my heart. So I'll be looking at to see what Danon Scorpion can do. He's by Lord Kanaloa. So the pedigree suggests this one should be a really good one. You also have another one here who just comes in the race off of a maiden win. That's Spirit the Sea. Well, Spirit the Sea is out of Land Over Sea, who was the Redham Racing horse who finished second in the Kentucky Oaks. And then you also have another horse that's 2 for 2, both at distances that have been, a mile and eighth, with Christophe Lemaire aboard, and that's Geoglyph, and he's by Dreyfong. Well, Dreyfong was obviously a top crack sprinter in North America, and he's now leading the first year sires in Japan right now. So, these are all things in terms of the tie-ins to North America that I'm always interested in, especially the younger horses, to kind of see, oh, hey, you know what? We see a lot of sales results with these, mares going off to Japan. They're trying to, obviously, as we mentioned before in the previous podcast before, Pete, kind of saying, hey, we want to strengthen our broodmare bands, and they're doing that tenfold sometimes. And you're starting to see the impact now, like I said here, with horses out of graded stakes winners in the U.S. And then on the non-North American angle, if you will, the favorite in here will probably be Serifos, 3 for 3, including 2 back-to-back graded stakes wins at a mile, coming off of pretty good effort last time out. So, for me, it's more just kind of the interest in the North American angles here, and seeing if Dreyfong can continue his success with Geoglyph, and then also seeing how both Danon Scorpion and Spirit the Sea do.
When we spoke with Candace recently, she talked about one of the things about these 2-year-old races being how much more likely in her mind that the 2-year-olds are to go on and be top 3-year-olds, as opposed to both Europe and North America, where it's much more of mixed messages when it comes to that stuff. Do you see that phenomenon as well? And in this particular group of 2-year-olds, do you see runners you expect to make an impact on the big races next year?
100%, Pete. Yeah, and Candace is right. And I think part of that, too, is just how the racing is structured in Japan versus North America. So in North America, it's really sort of, the 2-year-olds all about, precociousness and, running races at, 6, 7 furlongs up to a mile, but really sort of, not so much in line with the classic distances, right? So you may have a precocious sprinter that stretches out to a mile and a 16th and wins the juvenile here in North America, but then just isn't up to the caliber of going a mile and a quarter, mile and a half, the classic distances, if you will, in the spring. So in Japan, they gear that a little bit different, where you have horses sometimes that are running a mile and a quarter in their 2-year-old year. And that's not an issue for them. So mile and eighth, mile and a quarter. These are all distances, where these horses excel. This event here is a mile, but then the year-end event we'll talk about next week. That's the Hopeful Stakes. That's a mile and a quarter. So right there and then you can see, well, they kind of have their trainers, and their racing is really conditioned to prepare horses for the classic season next year.
So interesting that difference. It'd be a great thing to talk to horsemen here and there about on future shows, and how that changes the way that you physically do your training, and what effect that has on the horses themselves to go that far that early. And it is interesting. I mean, a totally different way of doing things, but we've seen from the success on the world stage that it can absolutely work. You mentioned what we've got coming up next week. 2 more nights. We'll try to cover them in one show. What can you tell us about what we're going to be chatting about then?
Sure. So on Christmas Day, again, provided the turkey coma hasn't kicked in for you, we'll have the Arima Keenan, which is kind of the year-end championship, and that's going to be a really good race so far. So I saw the preliminary entries to that race, and you're going to see the likes of the star 3-year-old Euphoria in there versus Chronogenesis versus some other top horses, title holder who won the last jewel of the boys Triple Crown. So yeah, it's going to be a star-studded event. And the interesting thing about the Arima Keenan is this is one of the events in Japan where the fans actually vote for the horses that participate.
So cool.
So, you as a fan have a say in terms of who you want to see in this championship. And yeah, they may not run, but you still can put your vote in and say, listen, I want to see, Euphoria. I want to see Chronogenesis, and, I want to see a title holder, for instance. And I want them all to battle it out at this, at the year-end championship in December. And yeah, so I think the one bonus about this too is that, in Japan, at least, it allows the horses to sort of, have that lengthened season, if you will. So, obviously here in North America, we go almost, nonstop from, if we talk about the 3-year-olds, for instance, they'll go nonstop from, possibly sometimes even January right through Triple Crown season, maybe get a little bit of a break, and then they're right back at it again in August for, Traverse and all the kind of 3-year-old classic races. But in Japan, what happens is that they all go on the shelf during the summer months and then come back for the fall. And then they're still somewhat, refreshing for that, year-end event in the Arima Keenan. So that's sort of the Christmas Day event. And then, on the 27th, we'll have, as I mentioned, the Hopeful Stakes, which is kind of the last big grade one of the season with 2-year-olds going a mile and a quarter.
We'll be covering it here. I don't know. Will you be able, for the Christmas Day races, will you be able to do your normal coverage over on InTheMoneyPodcast.com, or are you going to give yourself a break? You're going to go full Ebenezer Scrooge and make yourself work on Christmas? You tell me.
I'll at least have the selections done. I'm not sure about the analysis part, but we'll have the selections in there because again, it is a really good night. And yes, I will be participating in the Christmas festivities, and also have my smartphone off to the side, making sure I'm watching some racing from Japan. So yeah.
Well, you can take a nap after Christmas dinner and get up just in time. Oh, one more note before I let you get out of here. We got some carryovers to talk about Saturday night in the North American pools. What do we got for that?
Yeah, so we actually have a pretty big carryover going into the early pick 5. That'll be $3,000. So again, just those early races are usually pretty tough. So again, last week, I know someone connected for a pretty big score of, I think, of $1,000 last week. So that was pretty good on those early races because they aren't easy, especially the newcomers and some of the 2-year-old races that they have in there in the mix. And then for the big race, we have a carryover of almost $3,000, so $2,700 going into the super high 5.
Excellent. Good stuff, Klaus. We'll have you back on one more time to talk about it one more time for 2021 anyway, to talk about it next week. Really appreciate your help, and we'll be talking soon.
Thanks, Pete. Have a great day.
Today's show also brought to you by our friends at Black Type Thoroughbreds. They've been having so much success, and it's been so fun working with them. Had a great time out at the Breeders' Cup filming this video about what their experience of ownership is all about. You can check that out at inthemoneypodcast.com/blacktype. And to learn a lot more, you can go to blacktypetb.com.
So I cold decked pretty much cold decked the last 4 races. Yeah. Played around with the 2-year-old races. If pretty much anyone other than that Dylan Davis horse wins the second leg, I'm alive even a lot more in That's that amazing. Case. So, but it worked out.
You clearly played it well. I should have called you. I was running around like a nut, and it just came up, and I knew he and I had similar views, so I just was like, yeah, go for it. But anyway, it was good. That was nice, and then last weekend was frustrating. It was tough to be. I mean, it was some of the best picking I've done, but I just whiffed on that. And the horse made perfect sense after the race. The horse in the second leg, like the 12 runner, horse made perfect sense after the race. I wasn't smart enough to come up with it ahead of time.
Yeah, it's tough, especially when you get to this time of the year. It's just sometimes it gets tough. The track gets tough too. I think the track is concerning to me a little bit, in terms of handicapping, and some of the plays I have today, relate to that. So it'll be interesting to see how it continues to play on, but it looks like speed is just there's horses that should have yesterday should have completely fallen apart, that either won or hung around in the number. So,
I've decided, Craig, this conversation's interesting enough. Maybe we'll back it up and we'll start and we'll get some of this recapping in there. And now I'll just fake restart it for the resumption, because I think people will be interested in that. Of course, you can see our next guest. I mentioned him in the preamble. Anyway, he's here. One of the more popular guests that we get around these parts. Matt Vagvolgyi, how are things?
Doing well, Pete. How are you?
Things are good. We got a little bit of your recent recent history in what you've been playing. Good, nice job on the Cigar Mile Day pick 6 there. What do you think about this pick 6? Is this a sequence you're excited about playing, or are you looking more race to race?
Yeah, I'm going to play it. Little chalky, but I think you can get some value around it. I'm going to include a couple of, what I think are going to be short price favorites, but there's a horse I think is going to be a big favorite. One of the races I'm going to try to leave off the ticket and try to beat. So kind of a yin and yang type play, but no, I think there's value to it. Again, you don't always have to throw the favorites out, right? That's some of the arguments I get into with buddies of mine, of like, either you throw out the favorites and forget it and move on. I agree. There's some times where you just don't see the value. And that's why I think walking through the sequence, and I'm actually working on something to kind of build almost like a Monte Carlo analysis of your best possible return, your least possible based on your projected odds, not the morning line, but your projected odds, and then trying to get an average somewhere in between. So you can see what the parlay would be versus what your expected return is based on a value of the pool. So there's a lot of moving parts, but trying to get an idea of what that looks like, I think, is really important. And it helps me decide whether or not I want to play it or not.
I love that idea. And it reminds me of a guy I've been meaning to pay tribute to on these airwaves, legendary horse player who we just lost way too soon, Randy Gallo, who passed away recently. When I interviewed him a long time ago for 6 Secrets of Successful Bettors, he talked about doing something very similar to that, where he would map out different combinations of pick 6s and what they should pay, or what he expected them to pay. And at that time, this was early days of computers. So there were still, I believe, if I'm remembering right, there was still a lot of inefficiency at the bigger numbers, like the more logical combinations. I'm just going to quick and dirty this to make my point. But like, if it was all horses under 8-1, say, those combinations would pay less than they were supposed to, or at least not an exciting amount. But all it would take would be to get one number over 8-1. And then all of a sudden the payouts would go up dramatically. This has changed with the infiltration of computer money. But the idea would be to, put together the pick 6 combos you wanted to play, and then just eliminate the ones that weren't going to pay that well. And you just live with it if there isn't a winner over, in my oversimplified example, 8-1, and you put yourself in a position to cash the really big outliers. And doing that, shortly after that book came out, I remember Randy calling me one day when he and his pals had taken down, I think to that time, the biggest pick 6 in Aqueduct history using that type of technique. But that idea of really trying to look at the risk and reward in horizontal wagers, that's something that's something that I think that there's probably still a lot of meat on that bone. And I'd love to talk to you more about, either off air or in future editions of the show.
Yeah, it's getting close to completion. Obviously, working with people that are much smarter than I am when it comes to this, I've gotten pretty good. I would say the pandemic has done very well for me when it comes to Excel and some other programs. So I've always been good at it, but I've really gotten to the kind of the next level of it. So yeah, everything you said, I agree with. It's just trying to, it's not win percentage. It's not your strike rate. It's are you cashing a multiple of the parlay and putting yourself in the right position and knowing that before you go in. Like, so many people play bets and they'll be surprised at the low payoff. Well, you bet first choice and second choice in every single leg, and it came back that way. You can't expect anything. You can't expect anything different. So I think looking at it through that lens helps me really put myself in a position where I want to cash. I'm not just interested in hitting it. If I miss it, so what? You move on. And I had the opportunity to sit next to Randy Gallo at last year's NHC.
Oh, of course.
And we talked for days. I mean, literally just talked for days. He had so many great stories. First time I met him, it's one of those people you feel like you've known forever. And that's the way I felt with Randy. So just a tough loss. He was just a phenomenal person. And listen to some. He was like the computer player before the computer player existed.
Right.
He would tell me stories. He'd go up to the window and look at the guy behind him. Was like, buddy, I'm going to be here for about 2 hours, so you probably should leave.
Doing it all, Matt, because a computer player, but an analog, using the
Yes.
same ideas, but doing them in an analog way. There was no file uploading, I don't think, in his.
Nope.
Now, was Randy? He was at a final table, I believe. Was that your and Scott and Marshall's final table?
Yes.
Or was that
Yes, it was our that year that I finished. I finished third, he finished second, and Scott finished first. That was our 1, 2, 3 table last year at the NHC. So we're all sitting next to each other. So it was a fun time. It's really tough to hear that news, and himself and his two sons that were playing along. Just a great team. Like he would tell me, like they'd all go to different windows to put all these bets in, and they would just get everything they needed to get in. For their bets, and just odd bets too, like pick 9 bets at Arlington that were just kind of off the beaten path. They felt they had an advantage on. I'm fascinated with that kind of mindset of looking at it so deeply to feel like when you have an edge, how do you really exploit that and really drive it out? So no, phenomenal person, great stories. It's a tough loss to humanity in general, but especially the horse playing world.
Yeah, I'm so glad that came up, and I've had Randy's son, Randy. Actually, I don't think I had him on the show. I think I interviewed him for DRF back in the day. At some point, if and when he wants to chat and pay tribute, would love to have him back on again and get some more of those stories. But I didn't even realize that connection when I was saying that to you. I mean, is it possible he'd mentioned something like that to you that helped inspire this idea of you of the Monte Carlo pick 6 thing, or do you think you arrived at it independently?
No, it's something I've been looking at for a while. And the funny part is, in what I do for a living, I rail against that analysis in the securities world. I think it's a false leading. People view investment as a portfolio. They look at things differently when you don't factor in other things. This is where I think it's helpful, because I'm just looking for the projection of the return. I'm not trying to factor in all these other different things that go along with it in the investment world. So now it's something I've had on my brain for a while. It's just trying to get it together and have it work. And I think it's pretty close to completion. So I'm interested to see how it plays out.
Tell me more about that. Why does it not work in the securities world and it does work potentially in the world of horse racing?
Well, if you look at it from the basis of it, and this might go down the kind of in the weeds a bit, but if you look at modern portfolio theory, when it was created, it's not really designed for individuals. It's designed for entities. It's designed to invest into perpetuity, right? It never factors in the other side of it, which is more of the emotional side of things, how people act. And the inventor of modern portfolio theory is it's not applicable for the individual, because they're not going to invest into perpetuity. They're going to use that money at some point, which changes the whole dynamic. You're taking instead of adding. And then the other part of it is, in his words, humans will not stop being humans, right? They will get scared. Emotions will overtake their proper decisions, where Monte Carlo, the idea is to stay invested for the whole time. As soon as you make a decision to pull out or make an investment change, you can just reallocate, like I say, that great, nice looking report, just wrap it around some kindling wood and start a fire, because that's all it's good for. That analysis becomes useless. So that's where I combat it a little bit, because I think too much of like easy online calculators for stuff like that are based on that model fundamentally. There's so much more that goes into it, where for this, I'm just purely looking for the numbers, right? I'm just purely looking for that projected return in this finite sequence, where I actually think it's applicable and helpful, where, again, just my opinion, I don't think it's as helpful when it comes to the securities world, the world that I live in on a regular basis.
That's so interesting. And there's something about this idea of the long run and the ability to stick around long enough in the game for the long run to happen. I mean, I feel like that idea is part of it. The idea that we talk about betting personality becomes part of it, because you can have whatever edge in theory, but if emotionally you're not going to be able to hang in there for the long run to happen. I mean, there's a lot of differences that I just feel like in horse playing the investment, as it were, it's a lot more acute. Does that sound about right?
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I think a good example of you make a good point of not staying around long enough to see the fruits of the labor. The idea of, just betting like 20-1 shots at the NHC, like that came up as a big discussion.
Tony brought that up. Yeah. I remember it really made Scott Coles' teeth itch. He was talking about trying to like do a write-up about his sort of rebuttal to the idea that was the optimal game theory. I think that he got, too busy with 18 million other things in life, but hopefully he'll write that someday. But continue.
Yeah, it falls into this idea, and it's predicated on a Monte Carlo type analysis, right? Where you're using subsets of so many thousands of races. That sounds great, but listen, we don't bet on thousands of races at the NHC, right? And also the idea, again, it becomes down to what I think the most feared word is average, right? Especially in return. Average return gives you a final number. It doesn't exactly tell you all the points of how you got there, right? Is it volatile? Is it big peaks and valleys, or is it pretty smooth? Think of this, right? My rebuttal to that is, let's say you're at the NHC, you have 18 plays. You are, say you're 10 races in and you're only betting 20-1 shots or more, and you're 0 for 10. What do you do in that moment? I guarantee you, if you ask 10 people, 8 out of 10 people would say, I've just got to play something. I got to get a 2-1. I got to get going. I got to see the ball go through the hoop. It sounds as a human, like human nature will say that's a good thing, that you're just trying to salvage something, but you're going against your analysis, because the average might be the last 8 races you start hitting. And then you end up at your final number where you missed the first 10, right? So that's where you got to think of it a little bit differently. That's where I think the human element comes in, where most would deviate from that path, and then you completely destroy the whole process by not sticking with it and not seeing it to the end. So that's where I think it's flawed a bit. I think, we're not robots and computers that do that, where I think the human nature really does affect that type of analysis.
Where do you stand on that idea, though? Do you think from a game theory point of view, it does make sense to stick to 20-1 in the NHC? What would you say to somebody who told you that was their plan?
I would say, I don't believe in that. But again, there's no right strategy. So if somebody gives you the always and the nevers at the NHC or any gambling game, just dismiss it, because there's no such thing, right? It's not chess, right? This is a game of tangibles and intangibles. So I would say, if you're going to do that, stick with it, right? Play it all the way through, get the largest subset of that process involved to try to get to that goal. For me, I look at it more of a portfolio base, right? Where I'm looking at it where I've got my short-term risk, my intermediate, my long-term, right? I've got my short prices that I am very confident that can win, right? If I can get $6 to $10 out of these horses, and I really feel confident I can hit at a high clip, that's going to give me a good foundation. Now, where I'm going to live is somewhere in the middle. Those 4 to 8-1 prices that I'm trying to build the majority of my plays off of, but you have to have some higher long shot plays. You've got to have that aggressive portion of horses that you can tack onto to play those, to try to drive up your score. You're going to have to play some of those. I don't believe you need to play all of them. Now, day 1, I stick to that strategy. Day 2 is where everything changes, right? If you fail day 1, you're going to have to look at your aggressive portfolio to get into it. You're going to have to play the majority of those horses. If you do well day 1, you stick to the strategy, right? So day 1 is so important in the NHC of what you do the next day. But for me, that's the way that I look at it. And I draw up a matrix. I have literally all the races, all the horses. I have them all, in Excel by time and all that stuff. And I just continue to look, how am I doing? Do I want to pick off a higher price horse? Do I like this horse? Is my fair value better than what the board is telling me? Is it, do I expect a horse at 2-1 and he's 4 to 5, right? Strike a line through it. I move to the next one. So to me, I would say the best advice I would give people to the NHC is, don't be prepared to handicap when you walk in the ballroom. Be prepared to make decisions. Have the horses all out and just be prepared to say, as this goes along, I'm playing this horse, I'm playing that horse, and you go from there. You're not rifling through the form, because there's a witching hour, right? I mean, every track starts to run at once, and you've got people cheering all over the place, and all of a sudden you've missed a race, right? Just because you're not prepared to make that decision. So I'd say ultimately that would be my advice, is be prepared to choose the horses you want, not try to find the horses once you get in there.
That idea of being obsessed with being organized and ready to make decisions, that's fantastic. We're starting our NHC prep early this year on the In the Money Media Network. And I'll tell you what, it's going to continue next week, Matt. I just recorded yesterday, so we've got it in the can. A really great conversation with Justin Mustari, which I think anybody out there with any interest in conference play whatsoever is going to definitely want to check that out. But all right, so we've done like 3 giant tangents already. We haven't talked about the 2 things we're supposed to. I'm going to, so I don't commit a host fail here, get this so I can get you out of here on time as well. Let's dive into this pick 6 though, my friend. It kicks off in race number 4. Obviously on Saturday, we've got these 3-year-olds going 6.5 allowance optional claimers. We've got a big favorite here in Happy Medium. Certainly going to be all over my tickets. Who did you think was going to win?
That's where I'm starting with, and that's probably going to have 90% of my tickets. I'd love to go someplace else. I'd love to say something different, but I mean, there's a couple of horses that I would consider around it, but I mean, I think this horse is the speed of the speed, drawn to the inside. You know, I think Manny Franco is going to get this horse to run, and we've seen the last 2 races off that first race, long way off, back for 2 nice races. You know, has done it on a sloppy track, has done it on a fast track. I just, and again, we were talking prior about the profile of the way I'm seeing this track. Speed is deadly on this dirt course lately. And I think with a horse like this, that's talented, that also has a huge late pace figure, right? So I look at that big time, where a horse that can set the pace, but also have a lot left in the tank to turn it on in the stretch. I see it both here. So I'm going to lean very heavily on Happy Medium. A couple other horses, I guess, you know, to consider. I'll have as B's, but again, very, very lightly used on my end would be the 6. What do you think now? Just again, I think lays close enough to that pace where if you know, something happens and you know, Happy Medium packs it in, I think this horse could pick up the pieces and have first run there. A couple others would be, you know, the 4 Foolish Ghost, I think is interesting as well. And if the race completely melts down and completely falls apart, I think the 8 Chestertown has a shot to come from off of it to get it. But again, it's going to be a very short price. I think I'm just going to press the 1 as much as possible here and hope for the best and try to generate some value later on.
We see it the same way. Not much to add about Happy Medium. Very likely winner. I did have one other long shot alternative to throw in there as a deeper backup. The 5 Arthur's Hope. I just feel like there's been enough bad trips, and this horse does have a little bit of finish. I could see a scenario where Arthur's Hope could maybe get the job done if it's a meltdown. If Happy Medium doesn't win for me, it's going to be because it is a meltdown, and that's why the other horse that I wanted to have in there, you know, more on the C level, I would say, was Chestertown, who you mentioned. So the one big time press for me with a little 5-8 for Matt, same idea with the 1 with the 6, 4, and 8 being potential small backups as well. With that, we'll move to race number 5, maiden special weight New York breds, going 6 on the dirt. Another big favorite, and one that I was siding with, the 7 Bold Journey. Big race on debut. Just felt like a repeat of anything like that would make him difficult to defeat. I had 3 potential runners to use as backups. I would probably want half my money running through Bold Journey, but then a few others to mention. Golden Code, Pletcher, obviously so dominant in this category. All 4 of the 3 Golden Code siblings to make it to the races of 1. The Dam was a debut winner. Just, you know, too many positives there to completely ignore. The 6 Burt, I thought was worth a look. Kelly Breen in a lower key way than Pletcher, but excellent with firsters. Classic Empire, been above average with debut runners. And then I did, maybe for a penny, want to keep involved the 10, Our Son Jake. I just thought had license to improve as a second-time starter for a shrewd outfit. So 7 on the top line, 3, 6, and 10 on the B line for me. How do you see it?
Similar. Yeah, for everything you said on the 7, that's a horse on any type of improvement, like you said. I think this horse is going to be extremely difficult to beat. But you did mention a firster that I'm certainly going to use. And again, the difference between the first leg and this one, I'm primarily going to go through the 1 in the first leg. Here, I'm going to be heavier on the 7 Bold Journey, but I'm also going to use quite a bit Golden Code, the firster for Pletcher. Just to throw another stat on the Dam side, you know, you're looking at dirt sprints, 126 starts, 21 wins. That's good for 17% and a positive 90% ROI. So some very good numbers on the bottom side, and obviously, you know, on the sire as well. So Pletcher gets them ready. Those are huge numbers first time out. So a horse you certainly can't ignore. So I certainly want to use a combination of both of those. I would say for AB purposes, the 7 Bold Journey would be an A. A lone B would be the 3 Golden Code. Another horse to consider, if the horse would possibly get in, is the 14, which I don't think is going to happen. But hey, if it does, I'm not cutting in line to bet Finger Lake Shippers, but just watching that race, I thought that race was pretty good. I think this is a horse that might get completely forgotten about if draws into the field. So that would be like a lone C type to throw in as a play if the horse gets in, and that's Wahil, I believe it is. Again, low profile connections. I thought that was a decent race. I don't know, maybe could get in at a nice number, but the primary 2 I'm going to play the 7 and the 3 in leg number 2.
Let's talk about race number 6, New York Stallion Series 2-year-old Colts division, going 7 on the dirt. Who did you like in here, my friend?
Again, I'm going to stick with the idea of I'm looking for horses that are going to be forwardly placed. And I think the number 1, Unique Unions, is going to have a good shot to get to that lead. Interesting start to the career. The old pulled up Van Doff angle first time out. Comes back at Aqueduct and runs everybody off their feet. So again, similar is going to be a little bit more of a better competition today. But listen, I think Manny does the same thing that he did in a couple of rides yesterday. Just going to send and get to the lead and try to take him all the way. And I think I'm gonna gamble that that's going to be the case. So another horse I am going to use as an A, and going to be a little bit of a price, is the 8 Stir to Pot. Second time out, I thought that was a good effort. Took no money first time out, which again is usually a kind of a red flag for me. But I thought the horse ran fantastic. If you watch that race, I mean, just hung on the left lead, almost the entire stretch. I think if those little kinks get worked out, might be hurt from late and stalking the pace. So I'm gonna use that horse as an A as well. So 1-8 as A's for me, and then a couple other horses to consider: the 3. As well as Maceta, as well as the 6 Gino. A couple of horses getting on the dirt for the first time. The only issue I have is how far back I expect these horses to be, and I think that could be a bit of a challenge given the way I've seen this track run. So, if I were to kind of split the bike there, I would say the 6 Gino would probably get the nod for me, just being closer to the pace. But so I'm going to use those 2 as B's, the 3, 6 as B's, and I'm going to use the 1 and the 8 as A's here.
We got a couple others to mention. I put the 9 Iron Lion and Zion on top. I thought the win at the distance was good last time. It was a good setup, but I thought this was a progressive type that should get a good run through from the outside. Now, if it's a speed track, I think it will play right into the hand of Unique Unions, who I listed second and also wanted as an A in this spot. Needs that clean getaway from the inside, but you and I are on the same page with how good Franco is in the gate and in sprints in general. I like Unique Union's chances to do that. I'll have just as much 1 as 9 on tickets. And then one at a big price I did want to have on tickets as well as the 11 Un Ojo, coming in from out of town. But I thought you could make a case that Un Ojo could be the best closer in a race with plenty of speed. Now, obviously, it's pending on how the track is playing. But in my ideal world, I'd have Un Ojo on side. I had this one 9, 1, and 11. So I guess that shows that it is kind of an open race. The fact that we have so many different numbers, with you having the 1-8 on the top line and the 3-6 on the back line.
Yeah, I think this is one of the races. There's another race too. I think that's certainly wide open, where you can start to get some value out of playing some shorter prices, in the first few legs. But yeah, a lot of different directions you can go. And it's interesting. I actually have my best late pace figure is the 11 too. So again, if that race starts to melt down, and again, I think we've mentioned this before, Pete, of if you're playing the pick 6, pay attention to those early races, right? Pay attention to today, looking at how that track is running. So, again, I'm not saying there's a total bias. It's just, I don't know. I look for horses that should not be anywhere near the number in the stretch, setting paces. And when they start to win and they start to stay, in the exact and the trifecta and hang around, that starts to tell me that speed is doing pretty well. And that inside is doing pretty well too. So yeah, a lot of different directions you can go, but yeah, I think it's a spot you might get some value.
I definitely do reserve the right to move some things around based on how the track looks like it's playing, because I do have looks like there's plenty of on paper decent paces where I've listed a bunch of closers in my picks, but that is of course subject to change. Hopefully we'll get ourselves a fair racetrack on Saturday. I say hopefully. Sometimes it's fun to try to play the bias as a horse player too. I'm not one of these people who says, oh, it's a bias, I don't want to play. Sometimes those are the best opportunities, but when I handicap it like I did this card, I'd like to see it be playing fair when the gates pop on Saturday afternoon. Let's talk about race number 7. Starter allowance, 3 and up, 1 mile on the dirt. I was going to try to lock this one up with 2 runners. I like the 7, No Burn. I thought would pull a beautiful stalking trip. The race is 2 and 3 back. I thought would be good enough to handle this group. And then the 9, Royal Realm. This one looks to have cycled back into excellent form and looks like the one to benefit should the top one go to the front too soon. And then that's how I was going to try to do it. Just get out with the 2 A's if possible here, Matt. Is it as simple as that, or you got some clever ideas for us?
I'm in agreement with your 2 horses there. I'm going to use the 9 as a lone B, and I will use the 7 as one of my A's. The other A I'm going to use, and again, I'm not sure if this horse can get the distance, but at a price. And again, I'm liking Dylan Davis on these speed horses to get out there, get the lead, and see what happens. And that's the 6, Swinton. So, 2 back, took him gate to wire. I know got cooked in a bit of a pace the last time out on that sloppy track. Again, is the short turnaround a concern? Yeah, probably 7 days coming back. But, again, when you've got a track that has been favoring that front end speed, maybe I get a little bit of a price here and this horse can take him all the way. But with that said, I do agree with your comment on No Burn. Just getting that perfect setup, I think can, push the button and go right by in the stretch. So those are the 2s I'm going to use as A's. And like you mentioned, the 9, I'm going to back up with the lone B.
Okay, I do want to throw in there that, under this speed scenario, I totally agree with trying to work the 6 in there as a little bit of a backup, despite my saying that I was going to try to lock it up. I'm going to leave the picks as I had them, 7, 9. For you, it's 6, 7 on the A line. B is the 9 in race 7, which leads us to race 8. The other division, the Fillies division of the New York Stallion Series, 7 furlongs on the dirt. How are we going to get through this lane?
I thought this was a tough race. I'm curious to get to hear what your thoughts here are on this race. But I'm going to use the 2 A's. I'm going to use are the 3 Lowbands Legacy, and then I'm also going to use the 9 Bank on Anna. And I'm probably making a mistake in throwing out Morning Maka the 6. I think that is the best horse in the race on paper. I'm just concerned it's going to be one of those horses that's just not going to have enough to get it done in the stretch, and has been closer the last 2 races, slow paces. I think there's going to be much more speed up front, which I think this horse is going to have much more to do deep in the stretch. So this is where I kind of deviate a bit, where I'm trying to generate some value. And it came down to me where either do I just single this horse and try to see what happens, or do I look at some other horses? And I have question marks. That's where I try to deviate a bit and look at some other options. So the 3 and the 9 are going to be my 2 A's. And then the 7, how do you make your money? I think could be in that stalking position, has a good late figure, might be able to take it down if those 2 can't hang on in the front end. So those are the 3 I'm going to use. Like I said, I'm not going to blame you if you're riding with the 6 in this race. I'm not going to blame you at all, because it's a tough horse to beat. I just think the dynamics of this race may play against this horse and might burn some money here. So I'm going to take a shot.
I get it. If it's a speed track, Morning Matcha doesn't look as good. Handicapping it for a fair track, I thought she was a standout, yes, figuring that this turn back with the other pace signed on, that the race would be run to suit. But sometimes that stuff doesn't matter. If it is, go to the lead, stay on the lead, she could be up against it. And certainly from a game theory point of view, and the spot where you're playing a bunch of other favorites, leaning against one makes sense. I just couldn't do it. On numbers, I had to put her on top. And I think, again, on a fair track, I think she'll have plenty of pace and be able to get involved late. But I don't want to stand alone. And I thought your top pick was the most other interesting one for me. The 3, Lauband's Legacy, speedy, stakes placed, could prove to be the best speed, and if nothing else, hang around to have a say, but also could win, especially if the track is playing that way. And I also wanted some 5, Yo Cuz. I thought this horse showed a lot of promise on debut, not breaking at all, still rallying to pass runners despite what I thought was just an even pace. I think she's almost got to improve in this spot. I was disappointed. I handicap without the morning line and was thinking we were looking at a big price here. If only 9-2 or whatever, that's not very exciting to me into the teeth of some of these others, but maybe she'll go off at a bigger price. I had it 6, 3, and 5 in race number 8. Let's move on to race number 9, our nightcap allowance, New York breds, 3 and up, 6.5 on the dirt. Matt, you already know what I'm going to ask you. How are we going to get paid?
I'm going to try to use 3 horses here. I'm going to use them all as A's. So I'm going to use a set in the last race here. I'm going to use the the entry, but the one I like out of the entry the most is the one Debo. It's actually as simple as 1, 2, 3. The 2 Uncle George and the 3 Raven Rocks. Again, on a couple different levels. I just think, again, pace wise, again, I think Debo can sit in a good spot. I know drawn on the rail, sprinting can be tough, but again, I think can control the inside. Has the best finish in terms of my numbers, so I like that. Up on the pace, can get a nice trip. I think the 2 Uncle George is probably getting to the preferred surface. And this horse has run a bunch on the turf. I'm interested to see this horse run on the dirt. Class wise, has been running in some pretty good horses. So again, my concern is just for kind of from the clouds in a sprint like this. It'd be tough, but again, I think that's a horse to at least include if, especially with this level. I think that horse can have some say late. And then, the 3 Raven Rocks. First off the claim for Weaver. I know Weaver's numbers haven't been great, but the one thing you look at, if you look at his first off the claim, 26% winners with a $2.32 ROI. Again, could sit a trip, could stalk, and could be heard from late. So those are the 3 I'm going to go to. But this is a tough race. I mean, if I had unlimited budget, I'd probably buy it. But I'm trying to pick my way through this and see if I could get either one of these 3 horses home for the win.
I agree. It's very open, and probably no surprise. We only have one of your 3 and my 3 only have one in common, and it's definitely that type of race. And I totally respect the other runners you mentioned as well. And in my perfect world, I would have all 5 of these. I've decided to go with a price in here. Number 13, Color Me Potsy. I thought it was a little bit interesting. This is a horse I've followed for some time. Really been the line I used in my written piece about this is a horse who collects trips like I collect old rock and roll records. And last time, no exception, losing chance at the break. Now, at some point you say, okay, a lot of this horse's problems, they're of his own doing. How much do you want to forgive him? This is the kind of spot where I want to forgive them and take a shot because he's going to be a price. And while the likes of the 2 and the 3 make perfect sense to me, I just think they're going to be unexciting at the prices in a condition on a day where it wouldn't surprise me if something chaotic happens in the last. I'm going to use plenty of 13s. I also wanted to use the 12 Tapazirance off the rough trip last time. If you cherry pick his best bits and pieces of form, he fits with this group. Also should be a price. I can't leave out Uncle George. You made the key point about how this surface is on his blood where he's supposed to be better. And but again, is going to need him to go fast, I think. No early speed, but a horse that if it is a fair track and the pace develops, which it might in this spot, absolutely one I have to use. And in an ideal world, I'd certainly have the 3 in there as more of a backup at the very least. So my listed picks were 13, 12, and 2. With respect for Matt's other ideas, and for Matt, this one, and it was said with all due irony, as easy as 1, 2, 3. Any other thoughts on this pick 6 sequence before we pivot to our next topic?
I think the 13. I think you're going to get a nice price. Something I'm another thing I'm working on. I always put stuff on the list of like things that I want to do but haven't gotten to is doing some odds analysis of failed favorites at certain tracks coming to different circuits and that sort of thing. And that's something I am able to do in stats of what their morning lines are versus what their off odds are. So kind of doing some analysis there. I mean, the horse has failed twice at Finger Lakes as the odds on favorite. So I think you're definitely going to get a price. I think people will read into that. I think that's kind of my first thought, right? But you're right, though. I mean, if this horse gets the right trip and is kind of left off of folks' tickets, I think that 8-1 is going to be a lot more than that. I think you're going to get double digits on that horse. So interesting angle on there. I think the top lines are the Finger Lakes performances. The last 2, I don't think really show the true talent, and I think people will deviate away.
Let's talk about our other slated topic, Santa Anita opening day. I'm going to have a piece for attheraces.com next week written with Matt's help, previewing the meet in general. But I thought we'd have just a sort of preliminary conversation about what you saw when you did your deep dive into the stats. Any particular angles you're really looking forward to playing at this Santa Anita meet?
Yeah, well, first of all, I'm excited about Santa Anita coming back because it means 2 things. Santa Anita in and of itself, and I'm a huge fan of the Golden Hour wager. So happy to have that back in the mix. I would say this is if I look at kind of the tracks that I felt that like where statistics have really helped me find a lot of value. has been Santa Anita and Gulfstream. Now, Gulfstream's a little bit less because of the introduction of the all-weather surface. It's taken away a little bit from the turf side. But Santa Anita has certainly been one of them. It's become one of my top tracks, almost in line with my play in New York. I would say, like, on the dirt, one of the things I saw on the dirt in terms of speed, off the pace, that sort of thing, there's really not a whole lot to be said there. So it's shown to be a pretty fair style track where friends of mine have vehemently disagreed. No, you have to be on the pace, and no routes, you have to come from off it. I'm not really seeing that in the numbers. So a lot of stuff that I saw that jumped out, a couple of things I'll touch on are more on the turf. And, like, one of the things that jumped out to me just in terms of post position, getting off the rail when you look at turf routes. First one I'll give you here, Pete, is, turf routes, if posted 5 or better. So you're getting off that rail and you're projected to get up on the lead, use early to get to that lead first, as 96 starts, 25% winners, and a positive 16% ROI. So,
that's
and
amazing.
Just, watching those, watching the film on those too, looking at a nice setup for these horses, and the numbers kind of coincided with that particular angle. Another thing I like to do is look at specialists, right? And I've talked about these two jockeys quite a bit. I am certainly in the fan club of Rispoli, no question about it. But you look at Rispoli and Pratt, looking specifically at certain races and on the turf, and you look at Rispoli going a mile on the turf. I've talked about this before, but I just got to throw these numbers out again. I mean, 110 starts, 27% wins, 71% in the money, and still a positive 4% ROI.
I was getting my first question on the jockey thing was going to be, okay, so surely the crowd has caught up now and these ridiculous Rispoli numbers have come back to earth, but it doesn't sound like it's the case.
No, and I expect that when I run that figure, or like when I have it in stats, it updates automatically every day. So the positive is I can have a really strong angle that starts to go south. I think that's where value comes in too, to say maybe this is starting to change a bit. Maybe I got to get off, and I'm not seeing the value there either in the numbers. The prices are still there. And I'm telling you, just at this distance, he's a type that just saves ground, goes for that one big run in the stretch, and just continually gets it done. And those numbers to me are off the charts. And, similar, if you look at a mile and an eighth on the turf for Pratt, this is, 22 starts, 55% winners, 75% in the money, and a positive 37% ROI.
It's a tiny sample, but it's still insane.
Yeah. And like I've said, listen, I'm not afraid of the small samples, because it means, again, it could mean nothing, right? When you have not a lot to go on, they could be just that. But, listen, I think sometimes with those small numbers in this game, you start to beat the crowd. You beat the odds board, where it becomes so obvious, right? Where those odds just get pushed down. So that's something to pay attention to. A couple of things where I really get kind of, in detail. And I love the downhill turf course coming back. That's always a fun handicap. And it's nice to see these angles that I had a long time ago all of a sudden refresh and come back on the screen. It's like, you're back. But there's still some work in progress there, but a couple, Pete, that I would that I would point out. Post position to the outside here as well. That's 7+. So I looked at it different ways, but the one that popped out the most, post 7 or better on these downhill turf sprints, 27% winners. So again, just 15 races. So not a whole big sample. 27% winners, 44% in the money, and 117% positive ROI. Again, I don't know why that is, but just when watching it, maybe some of that sweeping
configuration, momentum. that weird little right hand turn. We've long theorized that, especially in a big field, it's a disadvantage to be drawn low on the downhill course. Now, granted, I think in a 6-horse race it means less, but when you're talking about a full field turf race, or even 8 or more runners, I think it's an advantage on that course. You get to keep more of like a normal course. You don't have to turn as far, just with that little dog leg at first. So that actually, those numbers match what my hypothesis would have been exactly.
Yeah, and I thought something that was interesting, somebody that I respect in this game, said if you just visually watch it, it's you're inside. If you have inside speed, you're more fighting the horse hitting the dirt and coming around that turn, not to fan out and take everybody with you. So it's almost like you're fighting the momentum of the horse, where outside you do have that speed, it becomes that big sweeping momentum that gets you to the front, where almost you're not really breaking stride. You're able to continue. So I thought that was interesting observation to look at, and it makes sense, right? I mean, logically, it would certainly make sense. And another thing on in terms of speed, that's one where if you look at it in these races, again, if you look at so this would be the seven races going down the hill of the horse that has hit the lead at the first call, no wins, just 15% in the money, and obviously negative 100% on the ROI side. So speed has certainly not shown to hold so well there as well. But again, just kind of gives you some different ideas, some different things that I'll look at. I know much broader piece will come to you, Pete, in that write-up you do for At the Races. But it's the stuff I love to do. Profiling the tracks, getting an idea, and seeing how they progress throughout the meet, how they change. And again, it can lead you to horses at some nice prices.
Couple of quick follow-ups for you before I let you get out of here. Did you have an 11:45 out? I can't remember.
I got a 12 out. So
perfect. We'll be done before that. I just wanted to make sure before I hit with these follow-ups. But so that idea that the rail isn't good going long on the turf, that's super counterintuitive to me. The one you mentioned in the first stat. Have you done any other digging on those numbers or thinking about that? I mean, there are places that get a dead turf rail for sure. I think of Keeneland, especially when it's a little bit off going, you'll see that. But man, I've never visually noticed that at Santa Anita. What give me some more just of your thoughts as a horse player on what the numbers are telling you there.
I wouldn't say the inside is terrible, especially if you're drawn, literally draw the rail, right? You're the 1, 2, or 3 spot there. It's just normal. And what I've seen is a lot of up and down volatility there. It's kind of similar in terms of just looking at the numbers, because I agree with you, right? Of getting to that rail, saving ground, and having that be the trip. It's almost similar to the headache I'm getting with this all-weather surface at Gulfstream. It's some days I think I know what's going on, and then I don't know anything, right? So it continues to ping pong back and forth. And what I think, kind of going back to our original discussion on averages, if you look at over the longer term, it doesn't really tell the story. So it's almost like an average where there's spots where the inside has done well. But yeah, I was surprised. And again, that's why I like to run these numbers. That's why I want to do this more, where, asking the Twitter world of like, what are some of these things you hear at the racetrack that you have to do, or you got to bet this horse, or you got to bet this style. And I just love to run the numbers on it just to see what it looks like and does it hold. And I like to that's why I wanted to give that one out, Pete. It's kind of a little counterintuitive to what you would think. Running at that distance, the numbers are coming back a bit different.
No, that's wild. And then I just also wanted to ask if you saw anything, because I do think, if you just asked me about track profile at Santa Anita, you mentioned it being fair. In my head, a lot of times, it is still tilted towards speed, but just not inside speed. That idea that, the typical modern racetrack, the rail not necessarily where you want to be, but forward being good. I was curious if you looked into that at all, if the numbers contradict that idea, or if it's more of a neutral hypothesis when looking at the actual stats.
Very neutral in the dirt. That's one thing I was surprised on, looking at front end speed, both sprinting and in dirt routes. Just your classic 20% winners minus 18% ROI. It's kind of like a whole lot of nothing going on, right? So it seems to be pretty fair. Same thing if you're looking at horses with a top late pace figure. So yeah, that kind of surprised me a little bit of it being kind of a fair surface, because visually, or at least I felt this way, that you've got to be on the front end at Santa Anita. You've got to be on the front end, and just, looking back, and then I can go through the charts. So I'll go through the charts and I'll watch some of these races, and it kind of, proves that number to be correct watching some of them unfold. So, another one I would throw out too is Pratt sprinting. You get 6.5 with Pratt posted like 6 or better. It's almost like a blind bet. I hate to even say that. I really do. But you give Pratt an opportunity to stalk and pounce sprinting. It's just unbelievable. And listen, the crowd is caught up to that angle, but listen, you're playing multi-race pick bets. I mean, that's something that, when that angle jumps out to me, I go to that horse first and see if I can build something around it. Cause he's so good at timing that 6.5. If he can stalk, get into a nice rhythm, and just let that horse run in the stretch, he's just, I know Pratt takes some flack, around the country, but I think he's one of the best when you look out at Santa Anita.
Oh no! I mean, I think he's one of the best anywhere for me.
Yeah,
I mean,
I agree.
Great stuff, Matt. Well, really appreciate your contributions today. We went far afield and back again, and looking forward to having you on to talk about some of these Santa Anita races. Maybe even one of the opening weekend days. We'll see what your schedule will allow for. But thanks so much for joining us and all the great work you do.
Absolutely, Pete. Always love being here.
That's going to do it for this edition of the show. I want to thank Matt Vagvolgyi one more time. We'll thank Klaus Ebner one more time. We'll thank our founding partners, Thoroughbred Retirement Foundation. Still time to give to them in 2021 to support the great work they do. trfinc.org/players. And also, of course, 10 Strike Racing. They've been with us from the beginning, and we love to root for the purple and black around here. Thanks, though, most of all, to all of you, the listeners, for making this show so much fun to do, for supporting us in those ABR Fan Choice Awards. Holler at us. Give us any feedback. Get your questions ready, too, for our listener appreciation show. Probably the easiest thing to do is to email me. And the easiest way to email me, if you don't already have my email, is through the contact page at inthemoneypodcast.com. Folks looking for more cool racing stuff around the holidays, a gift to give the horse player in your life, check out In the Money Plus. You can get all the details in themoneypodcast.com/plus, little digest of the picks from the shows, lots of extra content, written and audio as well. One more thank you. Producer Craig, done such a great job pushing all the right buttons all year long. Really appreciate all of his contributions. Wouldn't be where we are without him and his fantastic work. This show's been a production of In the Money Media. Our business manager is Drew Coatney. Our chief creative officer is Jonathan Kinchin. I'm Peter Thomas Fornatale. May you win all your photos.